Hey guys, it's Shelly from Clean Green Being. If it's your first time here, welcome. Thanks for stopping by. If you don't mind, before you leave, hitting the subscribe button and the bell notification icon, I would greatly appreciate it. And lastly, if you find the information in today's video helpful, be sure to hit the like button. So today's video is going to be a complete 180 from the typical content that I post to this channel. For those of you that don't know me, I am a registered nurse. I have a master's degree in nursing, and I have a clinical background in pediatrics and women's health. So being somebody that has personally suffered from postpartum depression and anxiety, and also somebody that has worked in a clinical environment with patients who were also suffering from postpartum depression and anxiety, I thought it was really important to sit down and share my personal story and some other educational facts that if you are personally suffering from postpartum depression or anxiety or one of the other number of disorders that can really stem from being postpartum, or even if you're a family member that is worried about a loved one that may be exhibiting symptoms of postpartum depression, then this is definitely the video for you. So if you're interested in sticking around to hear my personal story with postpartum depression and anxiety, and also learning more about the condition itself, then go ahead and keep on watching. All right, so as mentioned, I am a registered nurse, and I also have my master's degree in nursing. And when I was working clinically, I worked in pediatrics and also the women's health setting. So I do have direct experience working with patients who were actively suffering from postpartum depression. In addition to myself, I also went through postpartum depression and anxiety after my second daughter. So over time, this topic has really become near and dear to my heart, both professionally and personally. So last year I did have the opportunity to speak at a national conference about a project that I was directly involved in for identifying women who were at risk for postpartum depression during pregnancy and also during the postpartum period. Because with the lack of screening, over half of women who may be at risk for postpartum depression and anxiety during their pregnancy, they will go undiagnosed. So this project was a real eye-opener to me in terms of how important it is to really get information out there to educate women that it is okay to speak up if you're having symptoms, that it is okay to be honest with your doctors and pediatricians. You are not any less of a mother because you are feeling scared to take care of your child, or you're having doubts as a mother, or if you can't breastfeed. It's okay to express your concerns and feelings to your provider, because again, getting that screening is so important to getting you the right help that you need. So there are some statistics about postpartum depression and anxiety, and really I want to use the term perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, and that's kind of the umbrella term that encompasses all of the types of symptoms that you can experience during the postpartum period. So it's more than just depression, it's more than just anxiety. Some women experience symptoms of OCD, bipolar disorder, PTSD, and even psychosis on more extreme occasions. So I think it's really important to kind of put that out there, that it's not just postpartum depression, that it is way more than that. So in terms of statistics, perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, or PMADS, so these are actually the #1 complication of pregnancy. #1. Pretty crazy to think about that. I know our brains kind of innately go to more physiological problems outside of our brains, so like preeclampsia or gestational diabetes, things like that. However, postpartum depression and anxiety and all of those other conditions are actually the #1 complication of pregnancy, and it affects 1 in every 7 women, and that equates to 1 million women annually. So this is a very significant number of women that are either identified, so diagnosed with having PMADS and treated appropriately, and what's worse is that the majority of these women are actually undiagnosed and not getting the proper treatment that they need. In terms of negative outcomes, women are actually at an 80-fold risk for suicide during the postpartum period compared to any other time in their life. In fact, suicide itself is actually the second leading cause of death in the postpartum period. If you have had a child or you know somebody that has had a child, this is a very stressful time, especially if it is your first child, or if you have a number of children and you don't have support. There are so many variables that can come into play that can really set you up for being at risk for perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. You know, your body changes, your routine changes, you have to deal with going back to work if you are a working mom like myself. You have to deal with not having your significant other or parents there to help you. You have to get up in the middle of the night. You have to, the list goes on. It is such a stressful period that I actually wasn't surprised to learn this statistic that women are at an 80-fold risk for suicide during the postpartum period. It is such a fragile period in a woman's life, and if they've had a history of mental health issues or they have other life situational things that have occurred to them, it really just puts them at an even more fragile place to being at risk for these conditions. So in terms of symptoms that you may experience or you may be experiencing now, as kind of a good way to identify whether or not you may need to reach out for help. So the baby blues are a very natural experience after you have a child. Your hormones are kind of all out of whack. That progesterone that has been so fruitful in your body during the 9 months of gestation, it is keeping your hair nice, your skin nice. Progesterone is actually called the happy hormone. So that's kind of why women often feel their best, not always, during pregnancy. It is because that progesterone is at such a high level in the body. However, when you deliver, that hormone completely plummets, and some women have a more difficult time adjusting to that than others. I personally had a very difficult time whenever I delivered my second daughter, and I'll get more into my personal story here in a minute. However, in terms of baby blues, when that progesterone drops after delivery, you might experience some increased crying or a little bit of anxiety and things like that. However, it's not to the point where it overtakes your life and it affects your ability to care for yourself, others, and your baby. So when this crying or anxiety or these symptoms worsen, that's when you need to start being concerned and asking yourself, is something else going on here? Of course, if you're having symptoms of depression and anxiety during pregnancy, that's also a really great opportunity for you to sit down with your obstetrical provider and have that conversation. I know a lot of times women feel ashamed, and I can account for that. I felt ashamed to admit, especially postpartum, that I was having such extreme anxiety. I didn't want to take care of my daughter. I didn't want to communicate that, especially because I was a nurse and I knew better. However, that shame and kind of stigma that is out there really kind of held me back. However, nowadays, the stigma is lessening. More and more people are talking about their experiences with postpartum depression and anxiety, and there are so many more comprehensive programs available to you that it is really a great time in medicine and behavioral health for women to really seek out this help, because there are many people on the other end, on the clinical side, reaching out with open arms to welcome you. So stigma is another reason why a lot of women aren't getting themselves screened, and so many women are going undiagnosed, and we're having pretty significant negative outcomes because of that. So beyond the baby blues period, you may experience symptoms such as anxiety, of course, irritability, nagging self-doubt about being an adequate mother, oversleeping or not being able to sleep enough. I know with a newborn, sleep is just not always an option. However, I'm talking about more extreme cases. Of course, losing interest in activities that you would normally be interested in. You start to see that you're avoiding your friends and family, which is actually a symptom that I noticed. That is also a red flag. Bonding with your baby is a big one. Some women have issues bonding with their child after delivery, and I was one of them. And that is also another big red flag, that something bigger is going on chemically and physiologically in your body, and that is a sign to reach out to help. So there are a lot of symptoms that can be encompassed within perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. However, those are the big ones: not bonding, sleeping or oversleeping, of course, appetite, over or under appetite, avoiding friends and family, not wanting to leave your house, things like that, overly weepy, anxious, panic attacks. Those are some of the main symptoms of these conditions. Of course, for psychosis and things like that, those are very extreme and rare cases. That's when women start to experience those quintessential feelings of wanting to harm themselves and even the baby. So it is such a scary and potentially fatal condition that it is so, again, important. I'm going to say this 1,000 times. It is so important that if you or a loved one are experiencing any of these symptoms, that it is really important to reach out to your trusted healthcare provider. Last thing I want to mention before I jump into my own personal story is that postpartum depression usually kind of kicks in after the 4 weeks from delivery. However, everybody's different. Sometimes you have depression again during pregnancy, anxiety, etc., and after. However, I just want to make note that symptoms can kind of present themselves up to a year postpartum. So it can really develop over time, which I personally don't think a lot of people are aware of. Once you kind of hit that close to year mark, people just assume you're back to normal and that you should be fine. Why are you having these feelings? However, our bodies really just went through so much to create this child, to deliver this child, to care for this child post-delivery. Our hormones take forever to re-regulate. It really makes sense once you think about that these symptoms can really take time to develop. Adjusting to a new baby is hard. I worked as a new mother and it was very difficult to adjust, and that probably contributed to my symptoms as well. You have a change in routine, your sleep is off, you are worried about keeping your child happy and healthy. That also increases stress. If you don't have a support system, there are so many variables that can come into play to put you at risk for postpartum depression. Okay, so enough of the clinical, statistical information and things like that. Now I kind of just want to talk about and share with you my personal experience, because I think it helps to hear what other people have gone through. I think it's easy to sit through, be blabbing about statistics, but I think it makes it a little bit more personal to hear that real stories of women that have experienced postpartum depression. So I personally experienced postpartum depression and really mainly anxiety after my second daughter. And of course, being a nurse, I was aware of this. I had patients that experienced postpartum depression, and so I was aware of what to look out for. Really remember identifying that something was wrong when I was driving my daughter to one of her pediatrician appointments after delivery. So this was kind of beyond that baby blues period, which I personally don't think I had a lot of problems with initially after delivery. However, it was kind of into that second and third month that I started to feel off. So I remember driving my daughter to the pediatrician, and the way she was flipped, I had one of those little mirrors on the back of my car seat so that I could see her face in my rearview mirror. And I remember driving home from the office visit and looking in that mirror and seeing her face, and then I remember immediately wanting to look away. I didn't want to look at my child. I didn't want to look at her. It's terrible to say, but my body, I just had this aversion to looking at this beautiful, perfect newborn baby girl that I was so totally in love with. It was really hard to wrap my head around, and I was ashamed to tell anyone that. Who wants to go home and say, hey honey, I just drove our daughter home from the doctor. She's healthy, she's fantastic, but I don't want to look at her. And over time, I realized that I was experiencing moments where I didn't even want to be in the same room with her. Not because I wanted to harm her or anything like that. I just didn't want to be with her, which was a huge red flag, of course. Other symptoms that I was experiencing: panic attacks out of nowhere. I have had an issue with anxiety growing up. However, it was never debilitating until this period in my life. I would be fine, I would have a great day, and then I would sit down and then I would be completely paralyzed from panic attacks. I also cried all the time. I didn't want people holding my child, yet I didn't want to hold my child. It was just, looking back, it is just really sad because I didn't recognize at the time really how bad it was. However, I did know that I needed to reach out and get some help because I knew these symptoms were not normal. It is really difficult to be a mother that's struggling to bond with her child. It is really, really devastating when you have this beautiful child, you've had a lovely pregnancy, and now this baby is here and you don't want anything to do with it. It is just a really weird place for your mind to be in. So if you are experiencing any of those symptoms, I really can relate to that. It's really painful to kind of have this cognitive recognition and awareness of what's going on, and then on the other side of your brain you have these, you know, nonsensical feelings of not wanting to hold your child and bond with them. So I definitely recognized at this point I needed to reach out for help. During this time, I never had any thoughts of harming myself or my child, of course. However, you know, if you are experiencing any flicker of a thought in your brain, you know, please make sure you're reaching out. I have the crisis line listed down below of this entire video, and then some other resources at the end of the video as well for you, because there are so many comprehensive programs in addition to, you know, a therapist and medications and things like that available to you. So in terms of what I did for treatment, this is where things are going to get a little bit controversial, because I didn't go down the conventional path of taking antidepressant medications and anxiolytics or anti-anxiety medications. However, this is where I really want to stop and say that everyone is different. Your needs are different. Our bodies are different. So I am not shunning off conventional medicine. I think that it is highly vital in many scenarios. And if you need antidepressants and anxiolytics, by all means, they can be very helpful. For me, however, I wanted to take an alternative route because I personally just didn't want to be on any medication. So what I did was I went to see my naturopathic provider. They are a medical physician, so they have MD after their name. And I sat down with them and really expressed that, you know, I'm having symptoms of postpartum depression and anxiety. So I identified that. And from there, we got a full panel of my hormones, because as mentioned, after delivery, your hormones are completely out of whack. And for me personally, again, I think I was really sensitive to that drop in progesterone, and it just never really kind of climbed back up and regulated itself. So I was sitting at a low progesterone level. When the levels came back, my doctor was actually shocked because of how low they were. So he actually was not surprised that I was having these types of symptoms, because again, progesterone is that happy hormone. So what we did from there was actually get started on bioidentical progesterone. So if you aren't familiar with bioidentical hormones, they are different than your synthetic hormones that women use for hormone replacement therapy. So after menopause, the synthetic hormones, they are chemically structured in a way that our bodies don't recognize them as being endogenous or native to our bodies. The molecular structure is different. However, bioidentical hormones, our bodies do recognize them as being chemically the same as what we would produce in our body naturally. So my body recognizes this bioidentical progesterone as what it would create naturally. So that is the difference. I know when I was new to bioidentical hormones, I knew nothing about them, especially being trained as a conventional nurse. However, I do want to call out the difference, because it is the synthetic hormones that are getting the bad rap for cancer and things like that. However, bioidentical hormones, even though I'm not really going to go into the specifics about them, because otherwise this video will be like 3,000 years long, I do want to call out that they are very different from synthetic hormones, and they are not tied with the available research that is out there to cancer and things like that. And so how I took the progesterone was basically, they started me on a low dose, 25 milligrams once a day for 3 weeks, and then I would stop for my period, and then I would pick back up again once that was finished. And from there, again, we would get consistent blood work to monitor my progesterone levels to have them come back to baseline, which they definitely did. And I noticed a huge difference in my mood. My overall just kind of outlook on life and parenting changed. I noticed my anxiety was definitely lessening and becoming more infrequent. And I will say that after 6 months of being on the bioidentical hormones, I thought I was like cured. So I stopped taking them, which was to my detriment because I noticed these symptoms were creeping back. I was having more PMDD, so more severe PMS symptoms prior to my period. And of course, I went back to my naturopathic physician and we got my blood work drawn. And of course, my progesterone was low again. So I'm just one of those people that after delivery, my progesterone really just kind of never re-regulated itself. So once I went back on the bioidentical progesterone, I started to notice these symptoms lessening. So I have actually been on bioidentical progesterone for almost 4 years now, and I really, really love it. It just helps my mood and makes me feel like a whole human being again. In addition to bioidentical progesterone, I also saw a therapist to kind of help with coping with being a mother of 2, having to work. So I basically piled as much crap on my plate as I could. I was in grad school, I had a 2-year-old child, and then I had a newborn child. And then after that newborn child, my second daughter was born, I started my new career. So I really put a lot on my plate at once. So I also saw a therapist to kind of talk about those variables in my life, and then I also worked with my naturopathic physician to kind of regulate my physiological side to kind of get everything back in balance. So again, I know that is not the conventional approach. However, I'm just sharing my story to let you know that there are so many options out there for treatment. Where I'm from, we have a comprehensive program that involves mothers and their babies together. So you can work with a therapist and a psychiatrist, and you can bring your baby to your sessions, and you can work on mother-baby bonding, which I think is so amazing because this just wasn't available when I was experiencing postpartum depression. I think at this time it was just kind of right on the precipice of things kind of becoming more open and the stigma really kind of dissolving a little bit. It's still there in probably a lot of communities. However, it is definitely getting better. So with that being said, and not wanting to ramble on too much, I really hope that my story is helpful to you and the information that I'm sharing today. Hopefully, if you're experiencing any of these symptoms, or if you're even questioning that you have postpartum depression or anxiety or one of the other conditions for perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, please make sure you reach out to your trusted healthcare professional, whoever that may be, so that you can determine the right treatment path for you. So with that being said, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to view today's video and listen to my story. I really appreciate your viewership, and I hope it is helpful. Clean Green Being has new uploads every Sunday and Wednesday, so if you're interested in viewing all of our future uploads, be sure to hit, if you haven't done so already, the subscribe button and the bell notification icon so that you can be notified of all of our future uploads, and I will see you on the next one. Thanks, guys.